Welcome to Media Rants. I've got a very special, amazing guest today, Dr. Chu Mei Paing. She is the executive director of the Winnebago Area Literacy Council right here in Northeast Wisconsin. Dr. Chu holds a PhD in cultural and linguistic anthropology from the University of Colorado at Boulder. She is a first generation immigrant from Myanmar, Burma. Some of us refer to it by different terms.
Mhm.
Dr. Chu's scholarly writings have appeared in various academic journals. She has previously taught and given public lectures at Harvard, Cornell, Georgetown, UW-Madison, University of Colorado Boulder, City University of New York, among many others. Chu, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Tony, Dr. Palmieri, for having me on your show, I guess, the Media Rants. Yes, it's my
Yes,
pleasure.
I appreciate what you're doing so much, and we only met recently. You've been living in Oshkosh since 2024,
23 summer. Yeah, 23.
2023.
Yes.
And I've only recently learned more about your work, and it's just an incredible record of scholarship and activism. And we'll talk more about that as we go on. But let's first talk about the Winnebago Area Literacy Council that you are executive director of. So, what are the vision and the values of that organization?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Tony. Yes, I am new to Oshkosh, like you mentioned, and I'm also relatively new to Winnebago Area Literacy Council. So after, we moved here, I started volunteering. And a lot of the people in Oshkosh area, they are not aware that the Winnebago Area Literacy Council may be an organization that just work with the adults in reading. Actually, we are an organization that work with currently 100% immigrants, mostly Black and Brown refugees and immigrant populations in Oshkosh and the Winnebago area. So and just recently, in just 2 months ago, we went through another round of strategic planning. So that's where we kind of rediscussed the mission and the vision of the organization, as you know, in this political climate, right? As an organization that serves an immigrant population, so currently, the new kind of it's not drastically different, but the new kind of mission and vision that we decided the is to work to eliminate any kinds of barriers to the adult literacy in the Winnebago area. So as you can imagine, that does not necessarily preclude people who are not immigrants, but also anybody who will come through our doors. Yes,
So,
and
how do individuals and families become aware of the Winnebago Area Literacy Council?
yes, so in the past many, many years, the Literacy Council was actually founded in 1989, about
Right.
35 years or so now, that because of the Hmong refugee resettlement in the area. So to actually help those Hmong newcomers with the English language literacy, and it has always been like that. And we have had, other non-immigrant community members, people who are in need of reading or anything like this. Those have also come through our doors, like GED, etc. But we have a strong and consistent partnership for the past many years with the War Relief, which is a kind of our regional refugee resettlement agency that contracts with the government and
Hmm.
that kind of resettle different refugee communities into this northeast Wisconsin kind of Fox Valley region. So what they would do is then they would, have family members resettle in Oshkosh, and they would then refer those family members to learn English to organizations like Literacy Council. So that's how we've had many, learners come through our doors, and then through that, then we have word of mouth. People just learn through from their friends that, oh, you have this free English class. So all of our services are free. So then they just come through like that. Yes.
Amazing. So, when clients, I'll call them clients, work with the Literacy Council, are they taught to read by, is it a volunteer staff that you have?
Yeah, so it started out as just one-on-one tutoring. So those all of those one-on-one tutors are volunteers. So we will pay them with based on the learners what they want to improve on in terms of their language literacy, and then we find different tutors. Some of them are very advanced in their language. So, but then for the past 3 or 4 years, we have had, recently in the Oshkosh area, we had the influx of Afghan refugees, right? So that also
Right.
kind of motivated us to create small group classes. So right now we have a total of 10 classes that meet twice a week. And for that, then we started hiring teachers, paid teachers. So half of our teachers are kind of licensed in the school district, former teachers, retired teachers. And we have a few that are retired professors in the region, from the, market or like, yeah, so well, they volunteer with us. So we have right now a total of paid 7 teachers that teach across 3 of our learning sites in Oshkosh.
Incredible. Now, you mentioned the political climate that it's a change requiring a new strategy from your organization. Can you talk a little bit more about that? How would you describe this new or current climate and how it's impacting what your group is doing?
Yes, I mean, fortunately, we haven't had a direct impact as of now, right? Knock on wood. But like I was mentioning, our consistent partner, the War Relief, recently, got the order from it's an executive order from the President's office to stop work, right? So meaning that they are no longer accepting new refugee community members to be resettled in the U.S. So it's not only in the northeast Wisconsin, but it all across the nation, right? So that also means that the organizations like World Relief are struggling to have, to be like there is no more new refugee community members coming in, right? But how that affect us is also there is a sense of fear. So what that on our side of thing is a lot of sentiments and kind of this now explicit feelings toward immigrants. Right now people may have those kind of may have held those beliefs before, but now it's becoming more explicit that, oh yes, immigrants, they are all just going to be deported at some point, right? And they don't really understand the different kind of immigration paths that people have taken to come here. So those are not illegal that we're talking about, right? But people do not understand that and just kind of, and that create a lot of fear among our learners population. They may not also understand different legal statuses that they have. And so yes, it's just kind of trying to make sure everybody feel safe and comfortable in coming to class, right? We're an educational space and everybody should have a right to learn. And yes, so that's just an unfortunate event. I mean, thing that we're,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and I would imagine that the immigrant community that you are working with probably identify very powerfully with you personally because you are an immigrant yourself
Mm-hmm.
and can personally testify to what lack of, say, English facility does to oppress a person. I mean, you know, English is technically not the official language of the United States,
Mm-hmm.
although the Trump administration would like to make it the official
Yes.
language, right?
Yes.
As a practical matter, what does, in your view, a person with limited English ability, what do they experience in this society?
Yes, well, I mean, as somebody, like you said, when I first came to the US, I also did not speak English fluently. I would be very anxious or nervous to answer a phone call, for example. I will
Wow.
feel better to read a person's lip to make sure that I'm understanding everything correctly. And that create this, anxiety that is something that you cannot see, right? And then the confidence that you you're just kind of, you feel like a kind of imposter. So that's just my personal experience. But when it comes to our learners too, right? And we work primarily with adults. So we are working with people who are over the age of 18, and mostly many of our learners are in their, late 30s, early 40s. We have many
Mm,
learners who are in 70s, you know. So that also create a very interesting, like kind of also we talked about a little bit about how English is not an official language of the US, but then also there is this language ideology of English as this superior colonial imperial language, right? So when you see a person that is an adult, but might not be able to articulate their thoughts and opinions in the language that you consider that they should speak, you also kind of treat them as a kid. And that is that kind of create this very different power dynamic. Then you don't respect what they have to say as a person, as an adult.
Mm.
You don't really hear them. You kind of talk to them like a child, and you create many implicit biases that they don't know, or they are someone that we need to take care of. And then there is a series of kind of savior complex, right? So that's the kind of outward problem that we see. And then on the flip side, from our learners or the people like myself who have to learn English, is there is in linguistic anthropology, right? We say competence versus performance. So you may be very competent in the language. Like I feel like I'm very competent in English language. I learn linguistics. Like I know how the syntax work. I know how the why this conjugation happens and what are all these irregularities in English. But when I perform it, right, like when I have a speech, I still have an accent. And I may not conjugate the word, I may not pronounce the past tense of the ed sound in my pronunciation, but that doesn't mean I don't know when not to pronounce things. So there is that divide of when we're just interacting in like a normal conversation. You only see the performance. You don't
Hmm.
necessarily notice a person's competence in the language. So yeah, it just opens up a kind of worms in all kinds of ideologies.
That's actually a really good transition to your own personal journey. So let's talk about that. You, as we said, are from Myanmar, and you arrived in Oshkosh, Wisconsin in 2023. So tell us about the journey that got you from your country to the United States and then ultimately to Oshkosh.
Yeah, yes, yeah. It's always a yeah, interesting story every time I say it. People are like, wow, like so yeah, like you mentioned, I'm from Myanmar and I'm currently the only member of my family to in the US. So all of my family members they reside in Burma. And at the age of 19, I win the diversity visa lottery, which is also Trump administration is currently, trying to get in the previous administration, previous term. He is also trying to get that program out. So it's a lottery system, the green card lottery, they call it, right? So I was kind of like accidentally applying for this green card obligation in when I was at an internet cafe in Myanmar. And then 2 years later, I found out I win the lottery. And my mom and I, so I grew up in a single mom, single family, single parent household,
Mhm.
and she was like, "Oh, we don't know anybody in the U.S., so you should not, probably just go because it's just all the way around the world." But all of her friends, like, she's still young, she can go back to college, she can do so many things. You should let her go. So that's how I kind of arrived in the U.S., I guess. And my mom chose New York City as the city for me to go because in her mind it's a diverse city and I
Yeah,
would not feel like alone. She was right, If I had come to Oshkosh, Wisconsin straight, I don't know, I would be a very different person, I think.
right.
So I arrived in New York City and that's where I went back to college and I worked in the restaurant business and I went back to community college and then I went back to 4-year college and then I moved to Colorado for my PhD and that experience shaped a lot in the ways that I did my PhD dissertation. I the way that I do my work here now at the Winnebago Area Literacy Council, right, as an immigrant and as somebody who also experienced linguistic discrimination, right? So but yeah, so the journey has kind of took me all around the US and then I met my partner at the grad school in Colorado and then he got offered a job in Oshkosh and that's how I ended up in Oshkosh. So yes.
When you arrived in New York City, where I'm from, by the way, as you know,
Yes.
was it always in your plan to go to university, or was that
Oh,
something that happened as you lived in New York and became interested in topics or whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, I always knew that my mom has always emphasized that education is the something that she could give me. That's the only thing she could give me. So I know that I will go back to college, but I did not know when exactly. And I know that I had to start working. And like she gave me $1,000 and one-way flight ticket. That's it. So I had to survive really quickly. And I quickly learned that, $1,000 did not go that far in New York City. so so I started working, and then I was a cashier at a Japanese restaurant, and then I had a roommate at that time. We shared a studio together, and she was also from Burma. Like she is a couple of years older than me, and she was working in also a different restaurant, and she was like, oh, I went to this CUNY Fair and this, State University of New York, and you can apply for college and like it could be free, and there's a FAFSA and all that. And so she kind of dragged me to this fair with her. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll go with you. And then I ended up signing up, and I didn't even know I was filling out the college application actually. I thought I'm just filling out the
Wow.
information of the, and then boom, I was applying for college, I guess. And but one great thing about the public university is, I did not have to pay anything out of pocket, and I was able to go back to college. I mean, it was a community college, and so I really had a great time in New York City, and a lot of my professors and faculty actually were the great mentors. They were the one that kind of, took me under my wing. They realized that, many of us were immigrants, first generation, and
Mhm.
they kind of, yeah, explained to us all about everything. Like, so yeah.
Are you able to, and forgive me if this is a naive question, are you able to travel freely back and forth to Myanmar? Because we've heard stories now of immigrants that go back to
Mm.
wherever their home country is and then they cannot get back in because of Trump administration policies. Is something like that an issue for you?
Well, right now so in 2021, right, there was a military coup in Myanmar, and 2019 was the last time I went back to Burma to visit my sisters and my mom, and that was before that coup. But after the coup, I haven't been back. And that was actually, this was before the Trump administration, right? So
Okay.
this was actually not because of the Trump administration, it is more because of the military dictatorship in Myanmar, and the fact that my dissertation research had to do with the anti-military activists. And
Mhm.
it's just kind of risky for me to go back. So yeah, so in a way, yeah, yeah, kind of got trapped in all these political currents.
Right. Yeah. Well, you do. So you did get your doctorate degree, as we said, cultural linguistic anthropology. And I noticed in your website, you don't really refer to yourself as an anthropologist. You call yourself an anthropologist.
Yes.
What's the difference between an anthropologist and what you're referring to as an anthropologist?
Yeah. 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 That's a wordplay that, I just
Yeah.
kind of came up with myself because when I started like, studying for my dissertation and taking classes in the grad school, I always admire anthropology. I always, fascinated by humans and the different cultures and why they do the things that they do. But
Mhm.
then when I got into the grad school and I started taking many seminars on the mainstream core theories of the traditional American anthropology, I realized it is deeply, deeply intertwined with the colonial Western project, especially anthropology as a discipline that study people that are not you, right? So there is a
Mhm.
very kind of ongoing debate and discussion in anthropology of native anthropology or healthy anthropology, like myself, right? People who study their own community, people who are or the part of the communities that they study. So there's always this tension, and I feel like what can anthropology what can an anthropology that kind of reject that colonial desire or agenda in their research project could look like, kind of reverting and kind of undoing that colonial legacy. And many of the Black feminist anthropologists are the pioneers in those fields, right? Like Zora Neale Hurston or many others, right? And they have that kind of complicated relationship with the discipline, and I do too. And that's why I just kind of made a kind of appeal. And then a lot of the actually the academic anthropologists don't like that. So, and hence the reason why I'm outside of the academy.
Right. Right. Yeah, talk a little bit more about this idea of decolonizing the studies of, say, Burma, Myanmar. So when you say that the studies have, say, been colonized, what does that mean? And then what does it mean to decolonize them?
Mm. Yeah, so I like to think about kind of like decolonization as kind of two different projects. So there is a project to decolonize, meaning it's a physical material project of like, we were colonized by the British Empire for
Hmm.
many years since 1885, and we got the independence after the World War II in 1945 or 48, right? Just following right after the World War II. So so when we got the independence, that is the material physical decolonization project that
Right.
happened, like many other countries that got independence. But what the and in the aftermath of the independence, right, we had many a series of military dictatorship and a series of ethnic conflicts that kind of stay continued to this day. And that's also when we see many Burmese refugee community members in Oshkosh and like Midwest, right? So when I kind of think about decolonization in my work is this kind of residual colonial legacy in the ways that we stay kind of talk about Burma, think about Burma, and interact with Burma. So it's actually a lot to do with education and then that kind of mental residue that, um, the fact that like in Burma is kind of like complicated too, right? Because on one hand, we're trying to reject the military dictatorship that has this really, really bad legacy and heritage after the independence. But then also in rejection of the military dictatorship, there is this inevitable force that pull us toward the Western what we call kind of a lot of Burmese people say superpower. Like the US is one of them. Like we look up to US as the American democracy, the kind of like dream to be something like that. So I kind of trying to challenge that in my work when I'm talking about decolonizing, and especially I talk about decolonizing the area studies, right? Something like Burma studies, because
Hmm.
it is stayed to this day is occupied mostly by white Western and heterosexual men in that academic space and circles. So that also kind of reproduces inevitably, right? Because then it's the same kind of narrative is so for example, just many narratives and discourse around Burma as this example of a failed democracy, right? So as a person, as an anthropologist, right, and then who
Hmm.
is also as a feminist is then these are the people with the actual lives and lived experience we're talking about, and how can there be a case studies for a democracy that is either failed or successful. So these are the kind of like discussion that I'm kind of like talking about when I
Excellent.
mean decolonization. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about your 2021 doctoral dissertation because, this is a media podcast, and your dissertation examined social media activism
Yes.
in Myanmar in the aftermath of the coup in 2021. So what did you do in that study?
Yeah, so yeah, I've always been fascinated by media, and especially, I mean, I'm sure you can relate to it
Me too,
as
yeah.
a communications professor. I always find mass communication interesting, and the intersection of that with the politics and activism is, in this day and age is super relevant, right? We have to think about it and we have to talk about it. So in the case of Myanmar, like what happened was we had previous military dictatorships and then previous a series of very, you know, intense activist movement that only had to do with print media. And only then in the aftermath of the 2021 we get to really see the grapplings of the anti-military activists, their actions and interaction and the usage of the social media as really a way to go for like organizing, right? So I kind of became interested in that, and there is also this rise of, right, the kind of the global movement, the kind of interconnectedness between the people in the diaspora like myself and then people who are in the borderlands and people who are inside. So so I kind of like follow that. I follow the kind of media currents, the social media currents, and some of my findings, it just it's just inevitable that, right, as a feminist, I'm always attuned to the ways in which that kind of how feelings are produced in these activist movement. And I've always kind of noticed that every time I step into activist space, regardless of it's Burma or like here in the US, is very emotionally intense. Is there is a passion, right? Obviously, we're all passionate about the cause. That's why we're here, and we're talking about it, and how those channels into the social media network. And one of my chapters, for example, talk really in depth about the shaming culture on the internet. So very early, right after the coup, social media became a place where people post these, explicit images of people that they want to shame, that they believe that are associated with the military or the supporter of the military or the cronies, right? So that became this like clusters of visuals where it just kind of, reverberates itself. And then it became ethical and moral questions around, right? How long do we shame the people? And does shaming really work for the purpose of our kind of activism and movement? So my dissertation is titled Intense Engagement, because you have to engage with the social media in a way, and then you have to engage in a way that is oriented toward this intensity in the social media. So that's what I found. And it's like, I don't want to necessarily say like, oh, anti-military activism in Myanmar on social media especially kind of fails, but essentially I unfortunately kind of found that it really it is kind of go how do you say, like, kind of go in circle, right? It's this kind of feelings kind of feed off of each other, and it doesn't really produce this material decolonization from the
Mhm.
state, from the kind of like the settler state in all these ethnic lands. And that is the still open question. I do not know. Like my dissertation did not get to even exploring that. Hopefully, if I go back to continue my research, that will be something that I will be interested in, and actually interested in looking at how that anti-military activism works hand in hand with the global nonprofit industrial complex.
Absolutely.
Because
Do- yes.
yeah,
Does the military rulers in Myanmar, do they try and censor media?
they they do, yes. So they have trying to censor, ban Facebook and Instagram, and they have trying to right, they are trying to also get electricity so that people will not be able to use their phones for social media. So there is a certain kind of value in interacting with social media, right? So I'm not trying to say that, oh yeah, social media activism doesn't work, period. So there is that, the military also believe there is that power and potential in that social media activism. But also at the same time, right, um, the question is stay, what is the goal? What is it that we want out of, right? As an activist.
Right. Let's talk a little bit more about what's going on in Myanmar. The country, it's fair to say, is literally in a civil war,
Right.
correct? All right.
Yes. Mm.
So even though it's in a civil war, um, now I follow Western media very closely. I don't
Mhm.
see much coverage of the Burmese civil war. Um, what would you attribute that to? I mean, this is a nation of what,
Mhm.
55 million people, something like
Mhm.
that?
Mhm. Yeah.
How is a nation of 55 million people in
Mm.
civil war? Why, in your judgment, is that ignored by major media
Yeah, I mean that has also been one of the kind of things that a lot of the activists are fighting for, right? The kind of international recognition and awareness, and that hence the use of social media to trying to reach the people. I think earlier in the right after the coup, I think Rihanna tweeted something about Obama or something like that with the hashtag on now X, right? So that became a thing. Wow, Rihanna tweeted about Obama, right? Like, okay, whatever. The
Rihanna, the
celebrity.
singer?
Yeah, Rihanna the
Oh,
singer.
okay.
Yeah, the celebrity culture, But I
Mhm.
think, I mean, I attribute that back to, again, the I mean, United States also have its own political agenda when it comes to foreign affairs, right? Is like when we think about Ukraine or like Israel or Palestine, it's always there is an agenda attached to it, even though we may not be aware of it. Actually, under the first Trump presidency, the Obama was put under one of the travel ban in the quote unquote umbrella of Muslim bans, right? And now, just recently, I believe in February or March, it got put back again into the travel ban. So Burma is actually one of the countries that are in the travel ban. And if you look at the countries in the list, they are mostly all Muslim, predominantly Islamic countries. And Myanmar is officially, and if you look at also the number, is a predominantly a Buddhist country. And there is a
Right.
Buddhist extremism that happens that are against this Islamic minority called Rohingya, right? We all kind of heard about the Rohingya issue and genocide in Myanmar, right? So if somebody heard about Burma, it's always about the Rohingya issue. So I think this is just my like hypothesis, right? I don't really necessarily study the foreign like the U.S. Burma relations or anything like that, but is has to do with this and Islamophobia and the kind of the fear against the huge um, refugee population that have been in the past recent year, just few, since I think like 2000, following 2017, the most of the refugee population that have been resettled in the U.S. have been Rohingya population. So, and it's very different from the previous refugee population that are Kayin and or Chin or other ethnic minorities or minoritized population who are mostly Christian, right? So there is that kind of tension between like wanting to do something and then there is this U.S. immigration issue of then if we step in, then we are then have to take in these all these populations that are considered stateless because
Right.
Bangladesh is also not taking them in. So so I think it is a very complicated issue. But I also want to do mention that in 2024 last year, the Democratic Congress member, I believe, Betty Collin from I think she's from Minnesota. She's Democratic. She has started this bipartisan intercongressional effort called Obama Caucus, and that now
Okay.
have the 15 Congress members that are working on the Burma issues and U.S. Burma relations. And I think she started that with the Republican congressman from Michigan, because Michigan has the largest Burmese population, followed by Minnesota. So those two states started that, but their goal have been to work on kind of sanctioning the Burmese cronies and their economy, especially oil and
Mhm.
gas, that U.S. actually had a lot of relationship with. The Chevron, actually, the gas company has a lot
Really?
of gas from Burma. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So it is, yeah, yeah.
In
But for
the
the general public, yeah,
right. In the 1990s and the early 2000s, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing her name, but Aung San Suu Kyi
Aung San Suu Kyi, yes,
became kind of like an international celebrity,
yes,
um, became very popular among activist groups in the United States, I'm sure all over Europe. Um, from the decolonial perspective that you take, is she someone that's on the right side of this? She's
one side
currently,
of the history.
yeah, I mean she's been accused of being against the Rohingya population, right? Which she of course
Yes,
denies. But
right.
is she, and she's currently under house arrest, is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All
Yeah.
right. Is she, in your judgment, is she kind of like a Nelson Mandela of Burma, or is she just a, in Burmese politics, is she kind of just like a hack politician? Who is she?
Yeah. 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 Is Well, I mean, personally for me, uh, I think, you know, I don't necessarily agree with her politics anymore. If I even ever did, I mean, from the different generation and many of the activists that I work with, they have also kind of diverged from Aung San Suu Kyi's kind of era legacies and kind of looking into exploring, different ways that we could pursue democracy, right? And it's also an intergenerational conflict within these kind of movements too. But for a larger kind of Burmese public, many people still look up to Aung San Suu Kyi, and the fact that she got put back into house arrest, and there was it's just a very brief moment where she got put into the to at that she went to the Hague in the Netherlands to testify, for the Rohingya genocide, and she really explicitly uh, took side with the military. So that was a really bad taste for a lot of the activists. So many people kind of, yeah, diverted from her. But for the general public, they stay. This is the figure. This is the figure of the democracy, and our new exile government, right? We have an exile government that have been formed after the 2021 coup, called NUG, National Unity Government. They are all across the nation. They're in Washington, D.C. They have an office in Washington, D.C. They have an office in Canberra, in Australia. They have some of the ministers are in Paris, London, etc. I mean, that also has its own, like, complications with, like, being in these Western um, metropoles, right? But anyways, so for those politicians who are in this exile government, there have been recently been so many critiques against those politicians for their lack of or inability to kind of move away from Aung San Suu Kyi era legacies and kind of reimagine a different kind of world for Burma. So that there's a lot of tensions there too.
Is the problem with the government in exile, if you will? I mean, are they too close to the established governments of the United States and Europe?
That's the critique. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
and then the ASIAN government becoming some kind of infrastructure like a nonprofit, because they do a lot of fundraisers, they raise funds, their campaigns, and these campaigns funds are channeled through people from diaspora and people from the West, and then the West has certain demands, right? When you have that kind of relationship, so a lot of the activists and the armed militias and ethnic armies in the borderlands, they are really critiquing those structures, right? You're not on the ground, like you're in these kind of spaces, and
Hmm.
so how do you really know? Like, it's really different from like Tibetan exile government, right? Like when we are thinking about it, it's actually really struggling. Like I had hope initially when we started the NUG. I had hope that it would be something a little bit different. Yeah.
Right. If the United States government really cared about global human rights, and I have my doubts about whether they do, but
Yeah.
if they really did, what, in your judgment, would be the U.S. government's policy toward Burma? I know that's
Yeah,
a big
policy.
question. You're
It
not a
is a big
politician,
question.
but
Yeah, I'm not a politician. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I thought about it. Like, just in January, I was invited to join this 2-day workshop in DC to meet with some of those politicians on the Hill that are working on the Burma policy and U.S. Burma relations. Following all these other stuff that are happening in the U.S. politics, and what role that Burma should play in this chess game, I guess. And we kind of brainstorm and what is it that really the U.S. can do at this moment. For me, the very small thing that the US can do is the immigration policy. Because right now the war is still happening, and right after the coup under the Biden administration, we had the temporary protection status. So all the Burmese people who have been in the US for various different immigration status can be under the TPS and be able to work and write so that they don't have to go back home and be in that war zone or whatever. But that is kind of up in the air with the fact that Trump has recently ended or attempted to end the Haitian and Cuban and Venezuelan, right? The kind of TPS situation. So for me, that's like a really like low hanging fruit right now.
right.
To for those of us who are in the U.S. with this uncertain immigration statuses, but looking bigger, right? Like I really, or I also doubt, just like you. I don't know if there could be a kind of a policy, because if we are thinking about all these kind of global economic relationship that they have. And one of those, the Bahamas Caucus, it has been since last year, they've been trying to kind of introduce or put pressures on an IMF to put economic sanctions on
Mm,
Burma. But I kind of feel worried about that too, because every time in the past we have put sanctions on the country, right? We only see the effect on the people and the cronies and military generals. They continue on because they are so rich. They send their kids to study abroad in
right.
London, Paris. But general population like myself, I grew up under the previous dictatorship. We've never seen like Coca-Cola. We've never seen McDonald's because it was all sanctioned, right? I mean, it's not that I want to drink Coca-Cola and eat McDonald's, but so I don't know. Yeah, short answer is I don't know.
To be opposed to the military rule, but to also be a genuine democracy activist, not aligned with the establishment Western governments. I mean, that's a very difficult position to be in,
Yes,
right? But I think
yes,
my view ultimately is that that's where the majority of human beings in the world are, right?
yes,
So I think the trick is how do we all who are small d democracy activists, how do we all align with each other? I mean, it's a big project, right?
mm-hmm,
Uh, to do that. What do you see happening in Burma over the next 5 years? I mean, is the current military rule, are they like solidly entrenched? Does it
mm.
right now, for someone like you, does it seem like an impossibility that democracy, multi-ethnic democracy will ultimately prevail in Burma? I mean, what do you see happening? That's another big question, I know.
Yeah, it's another big question. I don't. Sometimes, when you when you get too close to it, you kind of get lose you kind of lose hope. So,
Right.
yeah, I think if I were not doing research with the activists, I did my field work in the border of Burma and Thailand, and I also follow some of those activists that fled to U.S. and all that. So it's like it's a very different kind of vantage point from those locations. So I feel like I don't know. I lived under the previous dictatorship that started in 1962 all the way until 2015. So that's how many years of dictatorship that never we were never able to get rid of. And I know that times are different. I just mentioned the way that we organize are also different, with the
Hmm.
social media and all these internets and everything is really so connected that in a way that we were not able to connect before. So there's a pros and cons to that. So I just feel like I have yet to see. I don't necessarily like to, how do you say, make it focused.
Right.
So yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know it's very, very difficult issue. I mean, I imagine it is from your time living in Myanmar. I mean, was the average person, and you were from the big city, right?
I'm from Yangon.
Yangon, right?
Yangon, yes.
So I imagine there are a lot of people that live their lives and don't and try to divorce themselves from the
Hmm.
politics, right?
Yes,
And I see that happening here in the United States, right?
yes, yes.
Right. So maybe a big part of our job as scholars, intellectuals,
Mm.
is to keep prodding
Hmm.
the people at large to
Hmm.
to at least recognize what's going on, right? I mean, for example, in the United States, I don't think democracy has ever been that strong,
Hmm.
but it seems like we are every day losing more and more of what we took for granted.
Mm.
And I see a big part of my responsibility as helping people to see that,
Mm.
right? And
Yes.
so I imagine it's like that in Burma also, right?
Hmm.
That
Yeah,
there are
I
lots
think
of people who just don't want to deal with it.
yes. Yeah. No, definitely a lot of people that are dealing and struggling with the kind of basic needs.
Right.
right? So right after the coup, the biggest movement actually in Myanmar was the civil disobedience. A lot of the people who work for the government boycotted, and my sister was one of them. She is a doctor and she worked for the
Mhm.
government, like public hospital, and she quit her job, and it's been 5 years. She did not go back. Some people unfortunately had to go back, and they quit. They were in the civil disobedience movement for 3 years or so, and then they went back. And because some people joined the movement and then they joined the armed resistance in the borderlands, right? But my sister has a family and she couldn't do that. But that also has this kind of consequences in that how do you support your children, right? So
Right.
so there is this interpersonal relationship, like me as a person who not just a scholar and intellectual but also a Burmese person in the diaspora. I work so that I can send back many home, so how do we contribute to that resistance, right? Like, so,
Right.
and I'm glad that she is still able to do that. But also at the same time now, just 2 years ago, right, the Burmese military also announced a mandatory military conscription for boys who are over the age of 18, and women who are not married. So
Mhm.
now my sister is now worried about my nephews, right, who is in that age range now. So there are also a lot of young people that fled the country because of that, right? Like, you would rather like not fight for the military, right? So there are so many things happening that, yes, I agree with you. I trying to write. I think one of the things that I could stay remain engaged these days is I write about these things in Burmese, and I write about it in a way that is not very jargony, right? Because that's also another
Mhm.
thing that I think academics struggle, and it's also the decolonization project in the academia, right? Sometimes knowledge is produced, but then it stays within the space that was produced, and actually do not reach to the people that we want to reach. So, like bridging that gap, right? Like kind of also the multimedia platform and project that we could reach to the public and have that relationship, like zines, for example. I'm very passionate about
Mhm.
zines, right? I make zines sometimes. I will read some of those literature and kind of retranslate into Burmese in a way that is like really relatable to our local context. So I think, yeah, we can do so many things. And then I also trying to, whenever I engage in a conversation with a fellow Burmese, right, um, all these other international conflicts or crises that are happening, with
Mhm.
Palestine, or like even some of the learners that we serve in the Literacy Council, like people who come from, South Sudan or the DRC, right? We share, there is a thread that is parallel all across our situation. So how do we see that, like across all of us, and not necessarily just center the US or the Europe as a kind of like example. So yeah, it's kind of hard, but I think we can do it. That's
Yeah,
the
I
hope.
agree. And what's deeply disturbing to me these days is that sometimes when you're doing pro-democracy work, you will invariably say things that are against Western imperialism and so on.
Yes.
And the Trump administration is using any kind of anti-American statement as reasons to throw people out of the country,
Yes.
which is one of the most deeply disturbing things I've ever experienced. And I've been here for a long time. So anyway,
Yeah.
we can do an entire whole program on these types of topics. Let's go back to where we
Yeah.
started, and we'll end
Mhm.
it. For
Mhm.
people who want to know more about the Winnebago Area Literacy Council, how can they find out more?
Yes, we are located in downtown Oshkosh in the US Bank building, is 111 North Main Street, and then we are in the second floor. So our office is open and we have classes here. So, if you're interested in volunteering, you can reach out to us. You can also look at our website at www.winlit.org. So yes, there are many ways to keep in touch with us.
All right, Dr. Chu, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really feel like I learned a lot from our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was a great, great conversation.
Absolutely.